1992, I was just starting out in life. I worked as an entry-level mechanic at a local shop that specialized in rebuilding engines. Not making that much money, it was at times difficult to make ends meet. So when I was approached with an opportunity to rent a large antebellum house for only $200 a month, I jumped at it. My ex-wife had met a lady whose aunt had passed away only a few months before. She was the executor of the estate, and since the house was still in probate, she could only charge the amount that was equivalent to the taxes owed on the house, and this came to about $200 a month. As part of the deal, I was to do some work to the house, kind of like a caretaker. But I think about the only thing I was able to do was paint the front steps and part of the porch. I didn't get a chance to do much else, mostly because of my work schedule, but also because I was only there for about 6 months. That was all I could take. My first experience was not long after moving in. In fact, we were still unpacking boxes. I was in the hallway hanging pictures, and we had one that was actually a plank of wood that had been embossed with a picture of Jesus praying in the garden. You know, the one that everyone's grandma had hanging in their house back in the day. In fact, I think it came from one of our grandmothers. I finished with that particular box of pictures and then moved on to something else. A few hours later, I was sitting in the kitchen taking a break from unpacking and having something to drink. Suddenly, I heard a crash. I came out of the kitchen to see what happened. When I got to the hallway, I noticed the picture of Jesus was on the floor. Initially, I thought, well, the wire on the back of the picture had come loose or the nail had come out of the wall. But after examination, I found that neither of these things had happened. Still, I thought nothing about it and simply hung the picture back up. The next morning, I got up for work, and as I was leaving, I noticed the picture was actually still there. So I thought, okay, cool. I guess it's gonna stay up this time. Or so I thought. That same day, I returned from work only to find that it was in the floor again. Any other picture would have broken by now, but after all, it was a plank of wood, so it was pretty tough. So for the second time, I picked it up and placed it back on the wall. Once again, checking everything thoroughly to make sure that neither the hanging wire or the nail had failed before doing so. This time, it actually stayed up for a few days. And then, it was a Saturday, so I was home from work. On this day, I was by myself. I was in the kitchen making some sandwiches and something to drink to take into the living room as I was about to watch an auto race on TV. I walked into the hallway to go to the living room, and as soon as I got through the doorway, the doorbell rang. But strangely, there was a banging on the door that was simultaneous with the doorbell ringing. And I don't mean a knock, it was a banging, like someone hit the door with their fist. This alone would be enough to startle someone. Naturally, I wanted to go see what the hell was going on, so I went and sat my food and drank back in the kitchen on the table and then headed to the door. As soon as I came back through the hallway, I heard a loud crash behind me. I turned around, and the picture had flown off of the wall and hit the wall on the opposite side of the hallway. It flew off with such velocity that I felt a gust of wind on the back of my neck when it happened. It actually knocked a chunk of paint and drywall out of the opposite wall. As I'm trying to gather myself together from the shock of what had just happened, the ringing doorbell and banging gets worse, so I shake it off as best as I can and go to the door to see what's going on. The ringing and violent knocking continues until I get about a foot from the door, and then everything goes silent. I quickly opened the door, and no one is there. It was a large porch and a large front yard. Jesse Owens couldn't have gotten away that quickly. I never gave up on the picture, though. At this point, I was determined. I'd put it up, and a day or two later, it would be on the floor again, and then I would just put it back up again. As time went on, other things began to happen. The spirit in this house obviously didn't like anything that had a likeness of Jesus. I had a Bible that I had gotten from my aunt. The Bible came with a wooden case. Inside the case, there was a picture of Jesus. On Sundays, we would go to church. I would leave the case open on the dresser. When I returned, the case would be on the floor, face down. This also happened repeatedly. We had a Cocker Spaniel named Brandy. The dog had a very sweet disposition. I had never seen her be aggressive with anyone. I noticed that there were certain rooms that Brandy would refuse to go into. She would pretty much stay in the living room. But the whole time she was in there, she would sit there and stare at the mantel over the fireplace in the corner. I would try to play with her, and she would play for a while, but as soon as we stopped, she would be right back on the couch staring at that fireplace. Sometimes she would sit there and growl while being completely fixed on that corner. In time, she started having spells where she would jump off of the couch, run over to the fireplace, look up at the mantel, and just go off. I had never seen Brandy get mean with anyone or anything. But if whatever she was focused on had been a real person, then I can assure you they would have had a very bad day indeed. It got to where this would happen at least once a day, and sometimes in the middle of the night. I finally had to start making her sleep in the bed with me just so I could get some rest at night. Over time, the incidents became more frequent and more intense. At times, the water taps would turn on by themselves. I'd turn them off, and then when I left the room, they would turn back on again. It always seemed to be the hot water for some reason. I don't know why. My ex and I worked opposite schedules, so I ended up being alone in the house a lot. The entity in the house seemed to really enjoy messing with me for some reason. My bathroom was off of the main bedroom. It was situated so if the bathroom door was open, you had a direct view of the bedroom door that led out into the hallway. In one incident, the water in the bathroom sink had yet again turned on by itself, so I went in there, turned it off again. As soon as I turned around, I could clearly see the doorknob on the bedroom door to the hallway turning back and forth on its own. I knew no one else was in the house. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This is the exact thing you see in a horror movie to create suspense, and here I was seeing it for real. I went over and opened the door, and as usual, nothing was there. One weekend, we had some relatives stay with us. They had 2 young boys. They stayed in the front room where the staircase was. The next morning, the 2 boys came to us and swore they had seen an old woman come down the stairs, stand at the bottom of the steps and stare at them. But when they tried to speak to her, she simply disappeared. We hadn't told them anything about the experiences in the house because we didn't want to scare them. By this time, I had lived in the house for about 4 months. I thought I had seen everything this house could throw at me, but I couldn't have been more wrong because the worst of it was yet to happen. There were 2 more events, to be exact, that I would have to endure before my time in the house would be over. The first happened one night when I was asleep. It was a rough day at work, so I was sleeping pretty soundly. I remember dreaming, or at least thinking I was. Suddenly, in this so-called dream, an old woman that I couldn't see was screaming in my ear. She wasn't really saying anything. It was just sort of a, ah! But then the screaming was so loud that it woke me up. So there I was, looking around and fully aware that I was awake. The problem was that I was still hearing the screaming, and I was fully awake. Now, I'm not afraid of any man, but I've got to be honest. I left the house and spent the rest of the night on my mama's couch. I'd have to say the most sinister thing of all would happen about a week later. Once again, I was asleep. All of a sudden, I was awakened by an immense burning sensation on my right side going around my back. When I felt it with my hand, it was actually hot to the touch. I was like, what the hell is this? I thought maybe I was having an allergic reaction or something. When I got up to look at it in the mirror, there were 3 distinct scratches going around my side to my back. They were so bad that they actually drew blood. For me, that was the last straw. We left the house soon after. In the years since, I have periodically rode by the house, if only to see if anyone else was living there. I thought a couple of times about stopping to maybe warn the people there, but then I would always change my mind, thinking they would just think I was crazy. However, I did notice one thing. No one ever stayed there for long. One time, there would be people there, and then soon after, the house would be empty again and back on the market. This happened certainly more than once over the years. Eventually, I stopped going by the place and tried to forget about what had happened. Until I decided to make this video, I hadn't been near the house in years. But recently, I was reminded of what had happened all those years ago. And the more I thought about it, the more I began to feel it was finally time to tell my story.